Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking on what might seem like a pretty intimidating challenge, dissecting the U.S. central banking system. For a lot of us, the Federal Reserve just feels like this massive, mysterious black box operating behind closed doors in Washington. But when you realize this single institution manages a staggering balance sheet hovering around $7 to $8 trillion, yeah, trillion with a T, mapping out exactly how it works becomes absolutely vital. And here's the really cool part. When you break it down piece by piece, relying strictly on the structural blueprints provided by the institution itself, the Fed actually functions a whole lot like a highly complex, living, breathing organism.
Think about this for a second. Who really steers the U.S. economy? It's a profound question, isn't it? I mean, when interest rates shift, when credit tightens up, or when the economy suddenly needs a massive stabilizer during a crisis, who is actually at the wheel? Well, the answer lies right inside the immense, meticulously structured power of the U.S. central bank. Understanding the Federal Reserve isn't just some boring academic exercise. It's about understanding the very forces that shape literally everything, from corporate debt yields and mortgage liquidity, all the way down to the purchasing power of the dollar sitting in your own wallet right now.
Okay, let's dive right in. The entire organism we're looking at today was born from the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. See, before this act, the U.S. banking system was incredibly susceptible to severe stresses. The real breaking point was the devastating panic of 1907. Back then, private bankers like J.P. Morgan literally had to step in with their own immense personal wealth just to bail out the failing banking system. That whole situation essentially embarrassed the government into finally creating a formalized monetary system, one actually designed to respond effectively and dynamically to financial crises without having to rely on private citizens to save the day. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll quickly cover the birth of the Fed, its 5 core functions, the Board of Governors, the regional reserve banks, the FOMC, and finally, data collection. Section 1. Birth of the Fed, the organism's origin. To execute its massive, overarching mission of promoting the overall health and stability of the entire U.S. economy, the Fed was built with a highly specific 3-part structure. Try to anchor your understanding to this rule of 3. You have the Board of Governors, the 12 reserve banks, and the FOMC, which stands for the Federal Open Market Committee. Literally everything the central bank does is carried out by the people working within these 3 distinct, yet deeply interconnected entities. Moving right along to Section 2, 5 core federal functions, the body's daily duties. Let's look at the macro-level responsibilities that these entities carry out for all of us every single day. First off, it conducts the nation's monetary policy, primarily by manipulating the federal funds rate. Number 2, it promotes financial system stability by constantly monitoring for systemic risks. Third, it supervises and regulates individual financial institutions just to ensure their safety and soundness. Fourth, it fosters the safety and accessibility of our payment and settlement systems, meaning they manage critical, behind-the-scenes financial infrastructure like the ACH network and Fedwire. And fifth, it promotes consumer protection and community development. That is an incredibly broad scope, right? It covers everything from massive macroeconomic stability all the way down to individual consumer rights. Section 3, the Board of Governors, the brain in D.C. You can think of the Board of Governors as the central governing brain of the operation, firmly planted in Washington, D.C. It's an accountable, transparent, and totally nonpartisan federal agency. To really understand how it operates, start with the number 7. The board is run by exactly 7 members, officially called governors. They are nominated directly by the President of the United States and then confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Now, you might be wondering, why an odd number? Well, it's actually a super deliberate design choice to prevent tie votes during critical, time-sensitive economic decisions. Get this, those 7 governors serve incredibly long 14-year terms, which are strategically staggered. This is just a brilliant structural choice meant to ensure deep, lasting stability. Because these 14-year terms intentionally span across multiple distinct presidential administrations, it mathematically prevents any single president from packing the board. This structural moat is exactly what keeps the agency truly nonpartisan as it guides the operations of the entire system. Now, within those 7 members, we have the number 4. The board includes a chairman and a vice chair, and they're appointed for distinct 4-year terms. You'll often hear names in the news like Jerome Powell or Janet Yellen associated with this crucial chairman role. This leadership team guides the Fed to fulfill its responsibilities under the Federal Reserve Act. And as an agency of the federal government, the board reports directly to and is absolutely accountable to Congress. Section 4, 12 regional reserve banks. The operating limbs. So, moving away from the governing brain in Washington, D.C., we find the operating limbs spread out across the nation. On one side, you have the centralized Board of Governors in D.C. On the other side, you've got the 12 reserve banks operating independently within their own geographic districts. Interestingly enough, these 12 districts were originally drawn up based on population and trade routes exactly as they existed back in 1913. That quirky historical fact is precisely why a state like Missouri has two reserve banks, one in St. Louis and one in Kansas City, while the entire West Coast is covered by just one single bank in San Francisco.
So, what do these localized operating limbs actually do? Well, they execute the highly detailed, hands-on tasks of the whole system. They're the boots on the ground. They supervise local banks and enforce fair lending laws. They handle the physical and electronic flow of money, literally distributing physical currency to banks and clearing checks. They also hold physical assets. For instance, the New York Fed famously holds billions of dollars in gold bullion deep underground for foreign governments. And finally, they act as the government's bank, maintaining the Treasury Department's transaction accounts and issuing U.S. government securities.
Section 5. The FOMC and Monetary Policy, the Nervous System.
If the board is the brain and the banks are the limbs, the FOMC, or Federal Open Market Committee, is the vital nervous system bridging them together. This group of Federal Reserve System officials meets at least 8 times each year to set crucial U.S. monetary policy. This is the room where it happens. It's where they make the highly consequential decisions to buy or sell government securities, which is known as open market operations, in order to contract or expand the money supply. These moves aggressively impact national interest rates and credit conditions for all of us.
The FOMC has exactly 12 voting members, perfectly marrying the central brain with the regional limbs. The voting bloc consists of the 7 members of the Board of Governors, 4 rotating Reserve Bank presidents, and crucially, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, who gets a permanent vote. Why does New York get the VIP treatment? Simply because the New York Fed is the specific entity tasked with physically executing those open market operations right on Wall Street. And actually, here's a fun fact. While only 12 get a vote, all 12 Reserve Bank presidents attend and fully participate in these vital deliberations.
Every single decision made by that incredibly complex voting bloc is strictly aimed at moving the economy toward 2 precise goals mandated by Congress: maximum employment and price stability. In economic circles, this is known as the Fed's dual mandate. Literally every open market operation, or every slight adjustment to interest rates, is a heavily calculated maneuver to maintain this very delicate balance. Finally, Section 6, Data Collection and Impact. Listening to the cells. To make accurate decisions for the whole body, the nervous system has to listen to the individual cells. The Fed isn't just a few people sitting around a boardroom table, it is a massive, sprawling network. Just listen to this. Teams of economists, analysts, examiners, and other professionals continuously gather and analyze data and information. A perfect example of this human intelligence gathering is the Beige Book. It's this famous, highly detailed report published 8 times a year that compiles anecdotal, on-the-ground information on current economic conditions directly from business contacts in every single district. This continuous gathering of regional and local intelligence is absolutely essential. By utilizing tools like the Beige Book and local economists, the Fed ensures that monetary policy is firmly grounded in reality and never becomes just some isolated ivory tower exercise. It allows the central bank to accurately assess U.S. economic health, promote stability, and actively guarantee that consumer and business voices from every single corner of the country are actually factored into the highest levels of policymaking.
So I'll leave you with this. How do the unique voices and economic realities of your local community shape the massive policies of the central bank? We've just seen that through the 12 reserve banks and the massive teams of local analysts, the structure is deliberately built to listen. The Federal Reserve isn't just a monolith in Washington. It's an intricate, highly detailed, localized machine designed to take the pulse of Main Street just as much as Wall Street. Thanks for joining me as we mapped the anatomy of the Fed in this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep challenging the data, and we'll see you next time.